Dear Father in heaven, Father, we lift up Elaine's sister and Jackie's son, and we pray that you help them to get better soon, help their symptoms not to get, much worse than what they are. And we lift up all the rest of those of us in the movement. Pray that you'll continue to keep us safe and healthy, and help us not to get sick over the coming months until a vaccine is available to us. We pray for those who we know who are not accepting the idea of a vaccine and have latched on to conspiracy theories. Those who've left the movement, pray you'll help them to come around to understanding the truth and accepting it about the vaccines and about COVID, and so many other things. And we lift up Elder Tess and Elder Parminder to you. Pray that you'll help to keep them strong in lieu of all the attacks and terrible things people are saying about them and to them. So that you'll be able to keep giving us the messages we need to hear and preparing us for the things we have to do in the future. Help us to understand and keep reviewing all the things that they've taught us. Help us to remember the things that we've heard and learned. And help us tonight to learn as much as possible about the subject we're discussing tonight, and to store up all this knowledge and information for the future when we have to go reach others with these same messages. And pray for all those we know who are battling illnesses, not just COVID. And we pray that everybody has a safe Thanksgiving holiday. That you'll be with us all through this time. And I thank you for hearing and answering my prayer. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. So you guys are going to share screen, I saw, right?
Okay, I'm going to try to see if I'm planning to.
If you need help, we can help you.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. Okay, here it is. Okay, here it is.
Perfect. Looks like you got it.
Okay. So this is Ellen White's Vision of the Path, Part 1. And it's Tess Lambert. It was done in July 10th on the weekend, on the Whitestone Foundation Weekend Prophecy School. And there was a lot of rain going on and interference and stuff. And so it took quite a while to get to get started. So I made a note about that here. Due to technical problems, elder test started at 13:40. The prayer was about 14:55, and the presentation started at 15:45. And she mentioned it was raining a lot. So it was raining so hard that she couldn't even hear Elder Tabot when he was, making a connection there with her. So I did put the prayers in because I really like her prayers, and sometimes there are things in there that are important to the message also. So I'll read. Well, Jim's going to start reading, actually.
Okay, I'm going to start with a prayer. So it says, if you kneel with me, we'll begin with a prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for our blessings. Thank you that we can meet, Lord, from all over the world. We are all still bound together. We pray, Lord, that you will be with us in these meetings and that you will speak. Lord, I pray that you will help us as we go through this difficult time, that we'll be able to know truth and know that we will not be shaken away. I pray, Lord, that we might, through this camp meeting, be more established, more sure of our faith, more sure of how you have led us in the past. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So I wanted to begin with some review. For those that watched the presentation in Australia last week, just our Sabbath presentations. At the beginning of the last Sabbath, I suggested a project for those that were willing. And that was to go back to all the lines they knew. I listed some, but I know that there were more than that, to go back to those lines and to actually place where we are. I suggested that would make a significant difference if we were to do that. If we were to actually place where we were on those lines. So I listed some from Acts 27 to the World Wars, but I know there are others as well, to place ourselves on those lines and know the ground we are walking over. So I just wanted to remind us of the big line, our line, the line of the 144,000, the line of the end of modern Israel. So we're just going to start with really just a 5-minute refresher. We all know these lines well. Most of us should be somewhat familiar with these lines, but it still helps to see them in front of us as we begin. So I drew the line of the 144,000. Then we have the lines of the priests, the Levites, and the Nethinims. First, from the church, 2 groups are called. Then another group called from the world. The sound of loud rain makes a few of the words difficult to hear exactly. And here's the lines. 144,000 priests, Levites, and Nethinims. So if we can remind ourselves of the 144,000, plowing, early rain, latter rain, and harvest, then we come to the first group called the priests. Plowing, 1989 through 9/11, early rain, 9/11, 2014, latter rain, 2014, 2019, harvest, 2019 to 2021. So I want to give you a quick spot quiz. You can write the answers in the question and answer box. Give me the waymarks for the end of ancient Israel that we would overlay over this. First of all, this number, 1989, this is 9/11, 4 BC, baptism, question mark. I think I know what you meant. 4 BC exactly, this waymark. This waymark, 9/11 on the board. Baptism, 27 AD. Waymark 2014 in ancient Israel. Where would you place Cana, brother? You've given us a waymark. Difficult to hear exact words due to rain. 2014 equals first temple cleansing. Cana, 2012, just before change of leadership, 2014. 2019, waymark, the cross. 2021. What's 2021? The end of ancient Israel. So we have the cross, 2019. Pentecost, 2021. Sunday law, the message goes to the Gentiles. 34 AD, and there's the 490. It finishes for the church here. Now the message will go to the Gentiles. Close of probation, the waymark for COP, 70 AD. And the second advent, when did Christ come a second time? Patmos, 100 AD. So that's how we see the end of ancient Israel lining up with the end of modern Israel. Twice to the church and then the world. First the church and then the world. Church in two parts. Church as the priest and the Levites. Church as the disciples, then the Jews that came in under Pentecost. From Pentecost to 34 AD. Then from 34 AD, lining up with Sunday law, then going to the Gentiles or the world. So I want to read a quote found in The Desire of Ages, 121.3. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell. It will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, when is the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan? When would you mark the last great conflict? I am going to mark it as the time of trouble, as that final scene of the great controversy before Christ returns. This is the last great conflict with Satan. In this time period, in the time of the last great conflict, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. So what's going to happen in that time period? No earthly support, nothing beneath your feet. She erased line to indicate. Because they refuse to break his law, they'll be forbidden to buy or sell. And it will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. So it is in that time period, at the last great conflict, that you find the death decree. We know that occurs in Jacob's time of trouble. So
I was going to say, I thought that was kind of interesting because I'm taking that to mean that the business about not being able to buy or sell doesn't happen until after the close of probation, after the Sunday law. Is that how you understand it? Does anybody want to comment on that?
That's what the line seems to indicate. that the time of no buy, no sell is after the close of probation, before Christ's return. That's the death decree.
Mhm.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. And I think that she might say more about it as we go forward to, in relation to the experience of John the Revelator.
So I'm going to go back. I didn't exactly remember exactly where I stopped, but I'm going to start here. Because they refuse to break his law,
Where's that?
they'll be forbidden to buy or sell.
Oh, okay.
And it will finally be decreed that they shall be put to death. So it is in that time period, at the last great conflict, that you find the death decree. We know that occurs in Jacob's time of trouble. So I'm going to erase this so we can have more room on the board. I'm just going to take a moment and erase this board work. And while I'm erasing, if you have found that quote, go to the beginning of that chapter. I'm going to ask, what chapter is this in the Desire of Ages? What is the context of this statement? So who's gone back to the beginning of the chapter? What chapter is it? What number chapter in the Desire of Ages? Chapter 12, correct? We are in chapter 12, and what is the name of the chapter? It's called The Temptation. So where are we in the Desire of Ages? She's covering the end of ancient Israel, and she's speaking about the temptation of Christ in the wilderness. So that's the context in which she talks about the last great conflict with Satan. Why is she talking about this last great conflict with Satan? Because what is Christ doing? He's in great conflict with Satan. So she's going to compare and contrast Christ's conflict with Satan in the wilderness with the last great conflict of God's people. I'll read the first paragraph of the chapter 12 of the Desire of Ages. It's DA 114.1. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. The words of Mark are still more significant. He says, immediately the Spirit driveth him into the wilderness. And he was there in the wilderness 40 days, tempted of Satan, and was with the wild beast. In those days he did eat nothing. DA 114.1. So go back to ancient Israel. Where are we in that history? This is where Elder Parmenter reviewed that really neatly in Portugal, how in that history we are in two different places, two different lines. We are in that period of temptation because for the end of ancient Israel in its primary sense, as we drew it out before, this is where we locate ourselves at the end of ancient Israel. What is this waymark? The last one behind us, 2019, it's the cross.
Mm-hmm. So then, see, it shows the disciples as the first group and shows them after the cross. And if they are representative of us, then we're at the first waymark after the time of the cross, during the time of trouble, before Pentecost. And
Where the X is.
Yeah, where the X is. And then the second one to come, that's a different line and kind of a different history, is the line of Christ as a priest. where our movement has become 30 years old. So that's the baptism. And then Christ goes into the wilderness. And there's X where we are going through the wilderness.
This particular presentation, they were in June, right?
July 10th.
Okay. Because anybody might be listening, it'll sound like we're there then.
Yeah.
I was sort of trying to remember. I thought it was June, July.
Well, you know what? It might have been June because actually, what did I put on there? July 10th. I don't know if that was when it was posted. Maybe that's when it was posted, but I can't, now I'm not sure.
You might be right. I could easily.
I mean, I put July 10th on there because that's what was on the, on the,
That's probably what it was. I just remember it being in the summertime.
yeah.
Seems like ages ago.
Yeah.
So it could have been actually presented sooner and then it was posted July 10th, maybe. But, okay.
Okay.
Are there any questions about the diagrams? Okay. Do you want to continue reading?
Sure. We are in that period of temptation because for the end of ancient Israel, in its primary sense, as we drew it out before, this is where we locate ourselves at the end of ancient Israel. What is this waymark? The last one behind us, 2019, it's the cross. Now we go into the harvest. It's the first group called. The first group of the church, the disciples, the cross to Pentecost, and we are here, X. This is the time of trouble for the disciples. And then also at the end of 30 years in the wilderness. And then also at the end of 30 years in the wilderness. So we are here and we are here at the X's. We are after the cross and we are after the baptism. Two different lines, two different themes. One is the theme of the first group called the disciples. The other is the line of Christ as priest, 30 years of training. The question is asked, how do we factor in the historical fact that Christ spent 40 days in communion with the Father and was only confronted with tests at the end of that period? Are we considering that communing part as noise? If so, why? This is an issue that we confront when facing any parable. It's how do you actually take those details and put them into a reform line? So when you have this temptation of Christ in the wilderness, those temptations, how do they confront Jesus? Over what time period? The account is short. I don't know how long it took Satan to bring Christ to different places, but if I was generous, we could say 3 hours. So if you want to take that literally and bring that into our reform line, what issues are we going to face? Because Christ represents the movement, so are we going to have those temptations confront this movement if we're generous all in one day? No. Christ's time period of conflict in the wilderness, those stories become a theme. The theme of that wilderness time period is Jacob's time of trouble. It's the time of temptation and test. So
So I guess that means that she can't really parallel it exactly as far as how long it takes. Like, it's not necessarily 40 days or 3 hours, as she was saying. But it's the theme of the temptation and test.
So we have a diagram, reform line set up of the first group and of the second. And if you go to the line of the 144,000 while they are in this time period, what happens to God's people? This is the death decree. Are they confronted with the power of Satan, the temptations of Satan, all at one place in time? No. It is the theme of that entire time period of Satan's efforts to destroy God's people. So in a parable story where you can't have that 40 days to do those three temptations become the theme of that 40 days. It becomes a symbol. So when you come to those 40 days, that entire time period is the story of temptation in the wilderness. It just happens that in that time period, Christ could be confronted with them as an individual in a matter of hours. So this entire time period is the subject of temptation in the wilderness, and we face that temptation at the same time period that we are to be in communion with the Father. If you want to have an escalation, I would suggest you can. It does become more intense, and I might explain that later. Later in this camp meeting, towards the end, we might have time to go back to that temptation period. So we have an escalation, and it will come to a head at this waymark, death decree, which we're...
Did I put that on there? Oh, yeah, the death decree is up there between the close of probation and the second advent. I think most of us know where that is.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we have an escalation that it would come to a head at this waymark, death decree, which we're fast approaching. We can see that before us, but it's not that we are oblivious. Did the people know the death decree is coming? Yes, they could already feel it. Are they already talking about the death decree in this time period? Yes. The 144,000 already know that the death decree is in front of them. They know what is happening. They can see the stirrings of the death decree externally. They can feel the attacks of Satan. So we already know what's happening in this movement, what the three temptations are, how they are building. It will lead to a crisis. We're already in it, but we'll come back to that another time. So we are in that wilderness time period where they see and are watching those three temptations. We are in the history after the cross trying to deal with the questions, the issues that we have about the cross. And it's in this context, particularly in this wilderness context, that Ellen White talks about every earthly support being cut off. So I just want to remind us one more time of what she's done here. She's taken Jacob's time of trouble. She means for the 144,000. We're taking it on the level of a fractal. She's going to overlay that with Christ's temptation in the wilderness. Christ's temptation in the wilderness is directly our dispensation. It is not Jacob's time of trouble. So we've overlaid Christ's temptation in the wilderness with the disciples after the cross. I hope everyone can follow how we've gone through those steps. That's where we're at in those three different contexts.
So, yeah, I was just thinking about the death decree is marked where in the same places as those X's, and I don't know if all of you saw those presentations that Tess gave where she talked about how death all those people died, on the same day. I don't know if this has anything to do with that or not, but
You mean when George Floyd, the death of George Floyd?
yeah, George Floyd died, and then
And then it was John Lewis.
yeah,
What's his name? Bosman Chadwick? Was that his name?
Yeah,
That was the
yeah,
Actor.
or
And
something like that, yeah. And then Helen Reddy, yeah, and they are kind of all, it kind of covers all the symbology of racism and sexism. And people that had made a mark in those areas died. And then I think she mentioned it's like we didn't have a death. We aren't having a death in the movement, but a death is marked, a symbol of death.
Yeah, of equality, all those champions for equality.
Yeah.
It was the shot heard around the world with George Floyd, and then all the famous people after that symbolized this death of all the champions for equality.
Yeah, and it kind of illustrates what she was talking about as far as fractals being quasi, what was it? Oh, they're self, same, and quasi, similar, quasi similar. Is that what it is? So it's not exactly the same, but it's quasi similar. Okay, where did you read up?
Right here. So we know, just to remind us that that second quote we read in the beginning of that chapter 12 in the Desire of Ages, she says, in those days he did eat nothing. What has he got to eat? Nothing, no bread. What is bread for the movement, for God's people? Bread is a message. So Christ does not have bread in a parable sense. We do not have what? No message. So in this period, there is no message. And it shows no message down at the bottom line. So just to recap, we have two separate lines from the history of the end of ancient Israel. We have the disciples after the cross, the first group called, they're the time of trouble. Then we have Christ in the wilderness after he has gone 30 years as preparation to be a priest after the order of Melchizedek. We've taken those two histories, and we've seen how Ellen White connects the time of trouble to Christ's period in the wilderness, which is all that we do on a fractal level. So when she says, all earthly support is cut off, what I want us to do on a fractal level, no, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. I didn't drop the line. which is all that we do on a fractal level. So when she says all earthly support is cut off, what I want us to consider is what that looks like for a fractal. What does it mean for us that all earthly support is cut off? Because the way that she expresses it, the way that it is taught by Adventism correctly from the quote for Jacob's time of trouble for the 144,000, she words it as, they cannot buy or sell, and a decree will go forth that they will be put to death. We don't have that experience. Remember, I hope some of you have them in front of you. If you have that experience,
You have drawn those lines.
if you have drawn those lines yourself, bring them to presentation, set them in front of you. Set in front of the lines of 144,000 priests, Levites, and Nethinims. So you constantly go back and can visually see what we're talking about. After 70 AD, who represents the 144,000? 70 to 100 AD, who's standing on Patmos to witness Christ's second advent? John, yes. So John the Revelator, writing Revelation from the island of Patmos. So between 70 and 100 AD, John represents the 144,000. Between 70 and 100 AD, was there a death decree for John? Yes. What did they do to him? They took him, they put him in oil, in boiling oil, to try to kill him. He experienced an attempt on his life. A death decree was not successful. So John experienced all earthly support being cut off. He was forbidden to buy or sell. He is a prisoner. And finally, it was decreed that he would be put to death. It fits with the experience of John. Now, John, between the cross and the Pentecost, was forbidden to buy or sell. Was he forbidden to buy or sell? Was it decreed that he would be put to death? No. The experience was different. So this is what we understand about a fractal. In that time period, there was not a death decree for the disciples. At that time, was every earthly support cut off? I would suggest yes, but it looks different in a fractal. So we understand for our experience now, it's the same thing. It looks different, but we still have that experience of every earthly thing being cut off at the same, that there is no bread, no message. So remember the context of the Desire of Ages. When was it written? 1898. So it's written in 1898. It is written in the context of the Great Controversy time period. It's in that history. It's between the writing of the 1888 version and the 1911 version that she's writing the Desire of Ages. So she's writing this with the viewpoint of that history. When she's writing about a Sunday law, so she's writing about a sequence of events. The Desire of Ages connects to that, where you'd expect to have a Sunday law, and then because you refuse to keep Sunday and dishonor Sabbath, you would have these escalating persecutions finally culminating in Jacob's time of trouble, when they would be forbidden to buy or sell, when those who would be keeping the true Sabbath would face a death decree. So I just wanted to remind us that of what context the Desire of Ages was written. And that fits with John's experience between 70 and 100 AD. So I want us to go through now Ellen White's dream, a dream that Ellen White had, and we're going to read the version that you find in the Review and Herald. So I'll put up on the board the reference for this. It's Review and Herald, January 12th, 1869, paragraph 1. The question before we move on, we have two concurrent themes on that line. So what our friend is doing is asking about the line of Christ in the wilderness, saying, do we have two themes in that history that occurs between baptism and the first temple cleansings, particularly that wilderness time period? Communion with the Father, which is preparations, and the temptations. I would agree with the insinuation made at the beginning. There's two concurrent themes. There's the temptation. There's also to be this communion with the Father, preparation for his work, a work of reflection. So the first point made, to understand the time period that we're in, we need to take every single aspect of it. That is why I ask people to go back and write where they are on all of those lines. What happened just after October 22nd, 1844? What happened after 1861? What happened after the cross? What happened after the baptism? What happened after Raphia? What happened after Paul sees the angel in Acts 27? So we need every one of those lines combined to create a complete picture of our experience. And that is what I want us to have in our minds in this camp meeting. We're going to read this whole portion, this whole section from Review and Herald of Ellen White's dream. She says, while at Battle Creek, about 5 months since, I dreamed of being with a large body of people. So while at Battle Creek, about 5 months since, 5 months before. So when did she have this dream? She's writing about it in January 12th, 1869. She's had the dream 5 months before, in January 1869. She has had the dream 5 months before, January 1869. So approximately, when is that? It's around August of 1868. So why does August 1868 become interesting for us? August 1868, why did we discussed August 1868 last year and 2018? What happened in 1868 externally? Revision. So it's showing the impeachment of 1868 and Andrew Johnson, and it's going 151 years over to 2019 and Trump. Impeachment of Trump. Who was president? It was Andrew Johnson, and in 1868, what did they try to do to him? He favors the South, he favors slavery, and in 1868, they tried to impeach him. They do impeach him. Impeachment does not mean removal from office. He was impeached by the House. It was the 151 to 20, it was 151 years to 2019 where we said back in 2018, due to that 151, you have President Donald Trump. He favors the South, he favors slavery or inequality, nationalism and its application, and they were trying to impeach him. So that was Trump impeached by the House in 2019 as expected. So 1868 takes us to which of our waymarks? It takes us to our close of probation. I just wanted to note She had this dream mid-1868. 5 months prior to this being written, she dreams she's with a large body of people. A portion of this assembly started out prepared to journey. We had heavily loaded wagons. So she sees a large body of people. Now she's going to begin a journey. Does all of that large body of people take part in this journey? No, only a portion. So take me somewhere in the Bible, just chapter, where do you see that? You have a large body and then a portion. You want
I'll read this part.
to, okay.
So while people are looking that up, she is reading the chats and she has a question there. So question was asked, while people are thinking, could it be the other witness to the erroneous prophecy of Nashville? Could the absence of the bread for Christ after his baptism, 30 years of the movement after 2019? But we have no prophecy such message. If I could rephrase this, I think that what she was reading was kind of in shorthand like that. If I could rephrase this, is this another witness that that prophecy of Nashville is incorrect? That we can see after the wilderness that there is no message in that time period? Now, I have never seen those who have come up with and believe this prophecy ever refute their acceptance of the 30 years being a training for the priests. Last I heard, they still accepted that, but they are no longer teaching those, but they no longer teach those lines. They no longer are guided by those lines. So I think I want us to keep that in our minds, whether or not they're still using these lines. For us, it's obvious. It's not just that they don't have a message. It's not that there can't be a message about Nashville. It also has implications within this movement. If people are coming in during this time period after baptism and saying we have a study, we have a message, that's an increase of knowledge, that's life and death, that God's people have to accept and drawing out disciples after them. What do you know that that message is? It's fanaticism. You can see that on other lines, but there is no message in that time period. It doesn't mean that there aren't other studies being done, revision of what's come before, and opening up of verses or passages, but there is not an increase of knowledge of any type or testing message in that dispensation. In that time period of that dispensation, it does come. What does Christ receive after he faces battles and has victory over those temptations? Then he receives the bread, but it comes after he defeats the battles of those temptations. So yes, there can be no message over Nashville if we believe the lines. Either the line that shows us we're after the cross or the line that shows us we're after the baptism. So I'm sorry, I probably didn't read that in the same way that she said it, but I think that the point is that Nashville couldn't have been a message from God because there was no message at that time from God. So it was fanaticism and not a message from God. So coming back to our dream, mid-1868, Ellen White dreams that there's a large body of people. A portion of this assembly started out prepared to journey. So I would like us So I would take us to Daniel chapter 2. You have a mountain. Not all of that mountain is going to go on a journey. Not all of that mountain is going to take down that image. It's not going to do the work of the stone. Instead, a portion is going to be cut out of that mountain to go on a journey to do a work. So the chapter, you may have others, the chapter I was thinking of was Daniel chapter 2. There's a large body of people. This is Adventism. A portion of that large body starts out prepared to journey. Not everyone comes with. We had heavily loaded wagons. As we journeyed, the road seemed to ascend. On one side of this road was a deep precipice. On the other side was a high, white, smooth wall, like the hard finish upon plastered rooms. So you have a portion begin. When they begin, they have these heavily loaded wagons. They're going to take all of their stuff, all of their things on these wagons, drawn by horses. They're going up this pathway. On one side, you have this solid, smooth white wall, a high white wall. On the other side, a deep precipice. So they're journeying between a wall and a precipice. So as you can see, she put 1989. And up there, she was talking about a stone being cut out. So I think that that's obviously our movement being cut out and starting at 1989. As we journeyed on, the road grew narrower and steeper. Some places in the road seemed very narrow, so much so that we concluded that we could travel no longer with the loaded wagons. We then loosed them from the horses. So they're going to take these wagons, they're going to cut off the wagons from the horses, they're going to take a portion of the luggage from the wagons and place it upon the horses. So they've started out with all this stuff. It's on the wagons drawn by horses. They're going to loose the wagons. So we'll stop now. I want to keep to time as best as I can. So we'll just stop at this point in time and come back after a 15-minute break and continue with the story of her dream. If you kneel with me, we'll close. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for our blessings. Thank you for the rain, Lord. Thank you for all that you give us. I pray, Lord, that you help us to understand what is being taught. May those who are confused, I pray, have confidence to speak up, to ask questions, that we might be in unity, to have assurance of where we are. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So I've kept to the time. We'll have a 15-minute break and I'll pass over to Elder Tabot and then come back. Okay, did anyone have any questions or comments on this first part? Okay, then I'm gonna take this share down and put up the other part. Okay, so this is Ellen White's Vision of the Path, Part 2.
You want me
Okay, you want to go ahead?
to- So we might begin with a silent prayer Amen. Welcome back, everyone. Just to remind us in a few sentences, what we did in our first presentation, we went to the Desire of Ages and we saw Ellen White compare and contrast two histories. She's going to take the history of the time of trouble and compare and contrast it to Jesus's experience in the wilderness. That's something we were already doing in this movement. She's going to make that comparison. She talks about the last great conflict with Satan, compares and contrasts that with Christ's conflict in the wilderness. And in that history, he's not just suffering from the temptations, he's also suffering from the hunger. So when he comes to the temptations, what is his bodily condition? He's weak. He doesn't have much strength to be able to withhold those temptations. He's not strong. So he meets those temptations from a position of weakness, and yet still has the power to have a victory based on a correct understanding, correct use of a thus saith the Lord. So we've already made application of that history to our own reform line. We've already connected it to where we stand now through the 30 years. We connect it to the time of trouble after the cross. Through that time of trouble for the first group called Jacob's time of trouble for that first group, a fractal. And we just went to the Desire of Ages to see Ellen White do the same thing, although she isn't speaking about a fractal version. We spoke what it meant to have no bread, no message, nothing to feed you with. So in absence of the bread, there is a condition of starvation, of weakness. There's been Christ's experience, listening to the messages of John, and then through the baptism experiences that were to encourage him and strengthen him and hold him in those 40 days. But now comes the hard period. So here we have overlaid the Jacob's time of trouble with the fractal version of that for the disciples. We specifically talked about John the Revelator, how he went through that in detail with his imprisonment, with their attempts to kill him, and on the island of Patmos. So we see he already went through a time of trouble as that first group called in the history after the cross. Then we overlaid that with the baptism time period after the wilderness temptations. And we understand that that's the history that we're in right now. So you can understand we're in a history where we're weak. Why are we weak? The message has gone silent. I'm not saying there are not presentations. People are putting out material that must be followed, but that key testing message has come to a conclusion. And there's one other issue that also creates that weak condition. Just after October 22nd, 1844, what shook the movement? I don't know if it's just me, but I don't see that we have a question and answer box yet. So I'm not sure if that's one of the technical difficulties we're having. So I know that for me, I don't have that unless there's something I haven't done right. So just after October 22nd, 1844, what's their doubt? Does anyone in the movement understand what happened on October 22nd? No. They're standing here at the X and they don't understand this waymark. Now, that's a history of failure. I found the Q&A box. That's a history of failure. They also have doubts. They also don't understand October 22nd. They, over time, receive an understanding of what happened internally. Do we ever hear an explanation of the external events for October 22nd? No. So they never get to the point of understanding the external events of October 22nd. So characteristic of their history of failure. Being a history of failure, how can we apply that today? We can find another history.
I just wanted to mention, I think that's very interesting, her pointing out that they didn't know, they didn't pay any attention to their external events because they were so focused on, the second coming, what they thought was coming. And I think that's also an indication of the success of our line, that we are paying attention to external events.
So we can find another history, and it's the cross. Just after the cross, did the disciples understand what happened? No. Can they explain it? No. And that is a history of success. That's one that we can apply to our own more than any other. End of ancient Israel, end of modern Israel. History of success, history of success. Just after the baptism, what is Christ's doubt? What doubt would come in? He'd be led to question his baptism. If Satan is going to tempt him about his job function, his role, tempt him to take over the kingdoms of the earth, what is he going to have to abandon? His baptism. So we can see on multiple lines, there's also a question about that, Waymark, whether it's a history of failure or a history of success. It's the same story in both, with some subtle differences. For this application, the same story for both.
And I was going to say, when I was reading this before, that that's kind of something that was talked about at our close of probation. I mean, people, I think, were wondering, how do you know you really that you really made it? That you really met the requirements for that close of probation. And I think that's a kind of a doubt about, in the same way that, Satan was trying to make Christ doubt his baptism.
So after overlaying those histories, placing where we are when all earthly support is cut off, we went to Ellen White's dream from the Review and Herald, January 12th, 1869. We recognized it was written in 1868. We reminded ourselves why 1868 was a subject of prophecy regarding time, because of the 151 to the 2019, bringing us directly to our close of probation. Someone has asked the question, but the disciples understood the cross at some point, didn't they? Yes. What was that point? At what point did the disciples understand the cross? We might do the lines of Christ with more detail in coming presentation, just looking at that one period. So I might not answer that now. If no one wants to shoot through an idea. Coming back to the dream, good question. We spoke about there being a large body of people. A portion of the assembly starts out on a journey. They have heavy loaded wagons. The road ascends. So this road is ascending. This road is ascending. On one side is a tall, white, smooth wall. On the other side is a deep precipice. As they journeyed on, the road grew narrower and steeper. So the road is going higher. It's also becoming more narrow, and the crevice over the side is becoming deeper and deeper. As they travel higher, the precipice becomes more and more deep. The road narrows to where they can no longer safely travel with the loaded wagons. She says, we then loosened them from the horses. So a portion begins on the journey with all their things. At one point, they can go no farther. They loosed the wagons from the horses. They take a portion of the luggage from the wagons and place it upon the horses and journeyed on horseback. So that's showing where they loosed the wagons and put the luggage on horseback. So as we progressed, paragraph 3, the path still continues to grow more narrow. We were obliged to press close to the wall in order to save ourselves from falling off the narrow road down the deep precipice. So as the path narrows, they press closer and closer to this wall. In doing this, the luggage on the horses pressed against the wall and caused us to sway towards the precipice. So if you imagine that you're on horseback and you're traveling along this path that is narrowing, you're on horseback, but there's also luggage attached to the horse. As the path narrowed and you get closer to the wall, as that luggage hits the wall, it drives you towards the edge of the precipice. We feared that we should fall and be dashed to pieces on the rocks. We continued on horseback, greatly fearing.
We then cut the luggage. Do you see that on there?
Oh yeah. It starts to hinder them as the path narrows. They cut off all the luggage and they continue. We continued on horseback, greatly fearing as we came to the narrower places in the road that we should lose our balance and fall. At such times, a hand seems to take the bridle and guide us over the perilous way. As the path grew more narrow, we decided that we could no longer go on horseback with safety, and we left the horses and went on foot, in single file, one following in the footsteps of another. So they reached this point, and then they leave behind the horses. Over this time period, what's the luggage and the what over this time period, what are the luggage and the wagons and all the horses doing to them? They haven't yet been willing to let go of that baggage. So they become endangered. That it's going to drive them off the precipice. Not yet willing to let go of that baggage. God directly intervenes. He takes the bridles of the horses and guides them, almost forces, along that narrow path until they get to the point they're willing to go on foot. So a portion begins. They loose the wagons. Then they loose the luggage. Finally, they loose the horses. Now they're in single file, one following in the footsteps of another. At this point, small cords were let down from the top of the pure white wall. At what point? At what point do the cords let down? At the point where they leave behind the horses. So it's here as they leave the horses that you'll have the cords coming down. At this point, small cords were let down from the top of the pure white wall. which we eagerly grasped to aid us in keeping our balance upon the path. So you have this wall, and a person is climbing along a path, a steep path, and they're holding onto this cord. At the point where they leave behind the horses and go on foot, now given the cords to hold on to. As we traveled, the cord moved along with us. So a quick reading of this dream. My imagination in time past is that they're almost leaping from one cord to the other, Tarzan style. Somehow they're moving from one cord, holding onto another cord, kind of like going up a ladder, but on a sideways. They're just holding on one to another bar to another bar. That's not the case. You take hold of this cord. Each one takes hold of a cord, and then those cords move with them. These cords are not stationary cords. The path finally became so narrow that we concluded that we could not travel more safely without our shoes. So we slipped them from our feet. We concluded that we could travel more safely without our shoes. So we slipped them from our feet. Now they have to let go of their shoes. We slipped them from our feet and went on some distance without them. Soon it was decided that we could travel more safely without our stockings. These were removed and we journeyed on barefoot. So they start with all their things. They had them loaded onto wagons and attached to horses, and they're going up this wide path with a not very steep precipice. And as they climbed higher, the path is narrowing. The precipice keeps getting deeper and deeper beneath them. They let go of the wagons, then they let go of their luggage. They finally let go of their horses. The cords drop down that are coming from over the top of this white wall. Then they loose their feet, loose their shoes. Then they loose their stockings, and finally they're journeying on with bare feet. And then we then thought of those who had not accustomed themselves to privations and hardships. Where were such now? They were not in the company. At every change, some were left behind, and those only remained who had accustomed themselves to endure hardships. So at the beginning, you had a large body of people. Only a portion of this began this journey, and then every single time, something must be left behind. This portion becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. The privations of the way only made the privations of the way only made those who had prepared to endure hardship only made them more eager to press on to the end. So these hardships, where they must leave behind. Some people fall away, some people become more eager to continue. Our danger of falling from the pathway increased. We pressed close to the white wall, yet could not place our feet fully upon the path, for it was too narrow. So the path is now so narrow that it doesn't cover the breadth of the foot. We then suspended nearly our whole weight upon the cords. So when marking the points of escalation of this journey, portion begins, loose the wagons, loose the luggage, loose the horses, We were given cords to hold on to, loose the shoes, loose the stockings. Now it's marking another point where it's so narrow, they sometimes have to suspend nearly all their weight upon the cords. Remember, they're not going from cord to cord. They're holding onto these cords. These cords are traveling with them. There's not constantly new cords. It's said in paragraph 5 how big these cords were. They're small cords. The cords travel along with them. Now they're suspending almost their entire weight upon the cord. We then suspended nearly our whole weight upon the cords and would exclaim, "We have hold from above. We have hold from above." The same words were uttered by all the company in the narrow pathway. As we heard the sounds of revelry and mirth that seemed to come from the abyss below, we shuddered. We heard the profane oath, the vulgar jest, the low, vile songs. We heard the war songs and the dance songs. We heard instrumental music and the loud laugh, mingled with cursing and cries of anguish and bitter wailing, and were more anxious than ever to keep upon the narrow, difficult pathway. So what is beneath them? It's interesting she mentions music 4 times: low, vile songs, war songs, dance songs, instrumental music. It covers about every aspect of society. Along with laughter, there's mirth. There's also cries of anguish. They can hear the wicked world below them. It keeps them more anxious to keep to the narrow path. Much of the time, we were compelled to suspend our whole weight upon the cords, and these increased in size as we progressed. So at the beginning, it's a small cord. As they travel, the cords travel with them, and the cords are growing in size. So these cords are increasing in size, and they travel with them. I noticed paragraph 9 that the beautiful white wall was stained with blood. It caused a feeling of regret to see the wall thus stained. Now, what is she noticing? They've lost their wagons, their luggage, their horses, their shoes, their stockings. They're traveling barefoot, and she's starting to see that the white wall is stained with blood of the feet of those who have gone in front. This feeling, however, lasted but for a moment, as I soon thought that it was all as it should be. Those who are following after will know that others have passed the narrow, difficult way before them, and will conclude that if others were able to pursue their onward course, they can do the same. And as the blood should be pressed from their aching feet, they could not faint with discouragement. But seeing the blood upon the wall, they would know that others had endured the same pain. Paragraph 10. At length, we came to a large chasm at which our path ended. The path is ended. They come to a large chasm. There was nothing now to guide the feet, nothing upon which to rest them. What do they have? Nothing beneath their feet. They have no earthly support. Our whole reliance must be upon the cords, which had increased in size until they were as large as our bodies. Here we were for a time thrown into perplexity and distress. We inquired in fearful whispers, "To what is the cord attached?" Back over here, the cords are let down over the white wall. Do they know what the cords are attached to here? No, they can't see over that wall. They don't know what the cords are attached to. While they're walking this pathway in their shoes, they don't ask that question. In their stockings, they don't ask that question. They're suspending most of their weight upon the cords. They don't ask that question. Then their feet start to bleed and they look at the blood on the wall of those who have gone before, and still they don't ask the question, to what are the cords attached? Then they come to the chasm, and now what are they going to ask? To what are the cords attached? Why? Because there is no earth beneath their feet. There's no earthly support. And if there's no earthly support, where do you have to place it? You have to place it upon the cords, and that requires a degree of faith that they have never had to place in these cords before. And the whisper starts to spread. What was this cord ever attached to anyway? My husband is just before me. My husband was just before me. So James White is in front of her. The large drops of sweat were falling from his brow. The veins in his neck and temples were increased to double their usual size, and suppressed, agonizing groans came from his lips. The sweat was dropping from my face, and I felt such anguish as I have never felt before. A fearful struggle was before us. If we failed here, all the difficulties of our journey had been experienced for naught. What does this experience sound like to you? Large drops of sweat falling from his brow, the veins in his neck and temples increased to double their usual size. Suppressed, agonizing groans came from his lips. The sweat was dropping from my face, and I felt such anguish as I had never felt before. A fearful struggle was before us. What experience is that? If anyone has the Q&A box open on your Zoom meeting, please feel free to participate. Sister A says Gethsemane. That's my answer. I agree. She's describing the experiences of Gethsemane. A fearful struggle was before us. If we failed here, all the difficulties of our journey had been experienced for naught. It's Gethsemane, and it's one other experience. Ellen White describes this experience in the context of an Old Testament verse. If anyone has that Old Testament verse, put it in the Q&A. But she describes Christ going through that experience twice. The verse says, his image was marred more that the form of any man, paraphrased. When did Christ go through that experience? When did Christ first go through that experience? There you are. I have to scroll down on the Q&A. I'm not getting anyone's responses. My fault. The temptation in the wilderness. Yes. So is the time of trouble, Sister D, that he goes through that. There's those two times. Temptation in the wilderness is described that way. His experience in Gethsemane is described that way. At the beginning of his work and also at the end of his work. If he failed in the wilderness, all the difficulties of his journey had been experienced for naught. There would be no hope of Christ completing his mission. If he failed in Gethsemane, then all that he had been through would be for nothing. Both time periods, both trials that Christ went through, the entire great controversy hung upon the entire previous experience would be for nothing if there was not victory in the wilderness and victory in Gethsemane. This is the experience that they are now facing as they look over this chasm that James and Ellen White are facing. So this is the wilderness experience. This is the experience of Gethsemane. And it shows on the reform line. Before us, on the other side of the chasm, was a beautiful field of green grass, about 6 inches high. I could not see the sun, but bright, soft beams of light, resembling fine gold and silver, were resting on this field. Nothing I had seen upon earth could compare in beauty and glory with this field. So on the other side of the chasm, does she see the sun? No. But there is light. Nothing she had seen on earth could compare. So where is this? Not on earth. What is she looking across to? She's looking across the time of trouble to where, not earth. The sun does not light this land. This is heaven. She's looking across the second advent to heaven. So, but could we succeed in reaching it? Was the anxious inquiry. Could the cord break? We must perish. Again, in whispered anguish, the words were breathed. What holds this cord? For a moment, we hesitated to venture. Then we exclaimed, our only hope is to trust wholly to the cord. It has been our dependence all the difficult way. It will not fail us now. What do we have to hold to? The cord that has been with them all the way. Still, we were hesitating and distressed. The words were then spoken. God holds the cord. We need not fear. These words were then repeated by those behind us, accompanied with, He will not fail us now. He has brought us thus far safely. My husband then swung himself over the fearful abyss into the beautiful field beyond. I immediately followed, and oh, what a sense of relief and gratitude to God we felt. I heard voices raised in triumphant praise to God. I was happy, perfectly happy. I awoke and found that from the anxiety I had experienced in passing over the difficult route, every nerve on my being seemed to be in a tremor. This dream needs to comment. It made such an impression upon my mind that probably every item in it will be vivid before me while my memory shall continue. She's writing this 5 months later, and she's writing this 5 months later, and she's still saying that. The experience that this dream left her with. So I want to make application. Their end goal is heaven. It's the second advent, going to a place that is nothing like what she has seen on earth. It's not lighted by the sun. Between the path and heaven, there is this chasm where there is no earthly support. To get from one side to the other, what do you need? You need the cords. The cords that were given when? Here, points to the chasm. No, these cords have been given way back here, points to where the horses were loosed. Those same cords have traveled with them. They started small and have grown in size. They have become larger and larger as the path narrows, till by the end, you're not holding just with your hands. What do you have to hold to? You can't hold the cord with your hands. You're hugging this cord with your entire body, like you would hug a tree the size of your body. It's to that they must hold to reach from one side of the chasm to the other. They start this journey with all this baggage. To travel this path, they must let go of the baggage. I've already marked the beginning in 1989. That's when we started.
Did it put it up?
No. That's when we started along the path. At each point, something is lost. First, the wagons, increase of knowledge. Then the luggage, formalization. You could mark these with messages. A portion begins, and then what comes in increase of knowledge, line upon line. Where's that going to lead you to? Daniel 11:40. Then you come to this waymark. The cords are given, 9:11. They're traveling by horseback. Then you have them loose the shoes, 2009, 25:20. Then they're going to travel on barefoot. Now the feet will start to hurt. This is time setting. And it's right here that she makes the point that at each point where the way gets more difficult, where something must be left, people fall away. What is this time period for us? This is 2012 to 2014. Now people are left behind all along the way at each point where the journey requires more sacrifice. But it's specifically here that she mentions it, which is relevant for us because this is where we mark a major shaking. That's when we experience the split with the path of the just. That shaking that occurred between 2012 into the early months of 2014. So the placing of that statement is not irrelevant. From 2014, she then speaks about how these cords are increasing in size. She speaks about the increase in size, but now they're having to suspend their weight upon the cords. What are these cords? What are the cords? Sister A says that they're the lines. Does anyone agree with that? I would suggest that the waymarks are where they leave things behind, but that the cords are helping them get from one waymark to another. It's the lines that bring us from one waymark to another. Sister R says it's Christ. I agree with you, but what does that look like for us? This is Lines methodology. I want to be more specific, not really more specific, describe it a different way. They come down here at 9/11. What arrives at 9/11? The arrival of the second angel, second and third angel. They're the lines. They are the lines arrive. And what's the characteristics that happens under the second angel? What did Christ bring with him? What that John didn't have? Parable teaching. So I find it interesting. Amen, Sister R. I find it interesting. They don't have them in this history prior to 9/11. But what else do they have? Because they haven't let go of their baggage. What does Christ have to do? Outside of the lines, it's the only time he personally intervenes, where he grabs the bridle of the horses and forces them along that path. Because they haven't let go of their baggage, there is this personal intervention where Christ brings them. He takes hold of the reins of those horses and pulls them along this narrow path until the people are willing to let go of their baggage. Once they reach that point, he gives them the lines. He gives them parable methodology. At the beginning, how much weight do they need to put on these cords? They're just small cords. They're not holding them. They can still walk along the path. Finally, they must let go of their shoes. It's narrowing to smaller than a breadth of a foot. Then they let go of their stockings. Then they come to the point where they must suspend weight upon them. This is the beginning of the midnight cry. There's going to be an increase of knowledge about parable methodology, about the lines that are holding them. And they're all shouting, "We have hold from above." They know their security is from the cords. They're saying that they have confidence in those cords. They mark that the blood of others, how others have suffered along this pathway. But then they get to this point, the chasm, and now it all changes, because now they're not just suspending most of their weight upon the cords. Now they would have to suspend all their weight upon the cords. And this makes a massive difference for them. Why? As long as you have some earth beneath your feet, it's a feeling of security. Now they're facing a chasm. All earthly support is cut off at the beginning of that chasm. And now those cords, those lines, that parable methodology is the only thing that's going to get them from one side to the other. And only now do they start to question, to what are the cords attached? This is describing the time period that we are in now. It's describing the period after the close of probation, when all earthly support is cut off. It's describing the experiences of the disciples after the cross. It's describing the history of Christ in the wilderness. All earthly support has been cut off. Our only safety, the only thing to hold us, is those lines, is that parable methodology. So what does this look like for us? What is our earthly support? And then there's another reform line. So what is our earthly support? You know, the lines aren't falling.
Feeling.
Oh, you know, the lines aren't failing. The parable methodology isn't failing. Sister A says, our old understanding. I agree with that, but that should have largely gone under the message of the midnight cry. But it's not quite so simple as that, as I think you know. I want to make my application. I want to suggest that it's different for everyone. This is perhaps personalizing it more than you could do a more general application. But for this application, I want to suggest that it is different for everyone. People are in this movement for many different reasons. Some are in this movement because they are women and their husbands joined the movement and they dutifully followed their husbands into the movement. Then what happened in the midnight cry? Husband leaves. Now what holds them to the movement? It's not this parable methodology. They're not holding on to the lines themselves. Then they will leave the movement. There are people here because their children are in the movement. It's their security. There are children here because their parents are in the movement. That's their security. There are people that are in the movement because they have a belief that by keeping to this movement, they will have some type of benefit. They will find position, power, influence. Some incorrectly hope wealth. They have other things that keep them on this path. All of that is cut away when there is no earthly support. Anything else that holds us onto this path, except those lines, will no longer hold us. The old understanding should have gone under the midnight cry message, but people did not understand the midnight cry message. We know that from the line of the disciples, don't we? We know that from the line of the disciples, don't we? After the cross, what did they say? If he can resurrect, he can destroy the Romans. We are more settled on that than we were before. We didn't know he was that powerful a general. They still had their old understandings. All of that is getting ripped away from them in this time period. Anything else that holds them to this movement, all the answers I see are correct, but it changes from person to person. Some are in this movement because they have an incorrect understanding of the kingdom of God. But there are two misunderstandings about the kingdom of God. That's why we have two reform lines drawn from the end of ancient Israel. So this also changes from person to person. Some people are in this movement because they think somehow it will be a political movement that will bring an idea of freedom that they are not actually going to find. Excuse me. Some people are in this movement because they think somehow it will be a political movement that will bring an idea of freedom that they are not actually going to find is what God is teaching. Other people are in this movement because they are holding on to their conservative evangelical idolatry. It changes from person to person. Other people are in the movement out of the loyalty to a husband or a family member in this time period. What people are finding is their earthly support is being cut off, and people are messaging me constantly in different despair, but for different reasons. Some of it is personal. Some of it they can't even explain except to know that life is no longer has joy for them, except to know that they don't look forward to tomorrow. There is agony and despair. Some of them, because of their family members they've seen walk away. Some of them are not messaging. Some of them are not messaging me. They're running ahead with their own idea of a message about freedom and liberalism, and this movement never taught. Not under the midnight cry, not now. Other people are running ahead because they believe they understand equality, but they do not. They still have evangelical idolatry. And piece by piece, people are realizing that there is no earth beneath their feet. Unless they trust the lines, the parable methodology, they will not make it through. Now, are these new lines that are given at the close of probation? No. These are the
No, these
these are the lines that have journeyed with them through all that time period, all that experience. There's no new lines here. They must hold on to the lines that they were already given. That is what will take them from one side of the chasm to the other. People are lost at every point along the way. But those who make it to this waymark, those who make it to the close of probation, they have never said before what holds the lines. Now comes in doubt, now comes in fear. What were these lines that were taught about the history of the end of ancient Israel? What was that line that spoke about the 30 years to the wilderness? What was that line of Millerite history? The lines of Moses. What was the line of Acts 27 of world wars? Where are those lines now? What holds them? And because of the amount of faith people must now hold in those lines, the questions arise even in the best and the greatest of those who have faith. Those lines, even in the minds of James and Ellen White, comes the questions that what holds the lines. It's not until they have the faith in who holds those lines, who gave them to them, who is at the top of the wall holding them. that they can have the confidence to reach the other side. This may sound in some way simple. We know that the lines are what brings us from one side to the other. I don't think we realize or perhaps have thought about enough the amount of faith that we are now required to exhibit. A sister asked before, do these lines show that FFA cannot have a message about Islam given to them after the close of probation, after November 9th, 2019? Yes, the lines tell you that. You have faith that the message is wrong because it was a message given in a time period when there is no message from God. So it didn't come from him. The lines tell us what is truth and what is error. If our faith is not centered in that, established in that, we will not make it from close of probation to the second advent, from Raphia to Panium, from 2019 to 2021. So the question we should all ask is, who holds the lines? And if you believe it is God, then question everything else that you're holding on to, every other earthly support that holds you in this movement. Only when we're willing to hold on to those lines with that degree of faith will we have the security to get over to the other side. We'll have another 15-minute break, then we'll have another hour. If you kneel with me, dear Father in heaven, thank you. Thank you, Lord, that you hold the lines. I pray we will each individually see what this means, see what it means corporately for this movement, but also see individually. What is that ground? What is that ground that has been beneath our feet? What are our own ideas and misconceptions? What were our hopes that have been destroyed in this time period? What did we believe that this movement, that it is not proving to be? Lord, what kept us here? Was it family? Was it hopes of position? Was it the desire for authority? If there is anything else that keeps us here, may we transfer our loyalty, our faith to those reform lines. May we know that you hold them. I pray that you will go through this experience, that no one needs to go over the precipice. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, that's the end of part 2, and there's still there's 4 parts altogether that we're going to do another time. And we're going to do 3 and 4.
I'm really glad you did this study.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Well, I
I've
tried to
always
put on
liked that
Mark.
vision. Thank you.
You got kind of cut off, Sister Sue Ellen. What did you say?
I said I tried to put all the
But
label all the waymarks that she mentioned throughout the thing.
nice. You did a great job. Thank you. You
Well, I just think it's very it's really nice to know where we are according to this line and the vision that I think we're like in the middle of the chasm there.
yeah, I agree.
And we've gone a long way and there's not very far to go.
Coming up to the formalization of the message.
Right.
Mhm.
And I've been listening to I'm going to be doing the notes on twin institutions. That was the last one she did in LGC. And I was listening to it today. And it's always interesting the things you heard before, but you didn't hear. But I've had an idea on this anyways, but I mean, she said it really kind of plainly. But she's towards the end and she talks about the twin institutions, and she says specifically that the formalization of the message is about marriage. And then she says that, I'm trying to remember exactly how she says it, so it might be not quite right, but she says that, and it's going to be taking people a place they don't want to go, something along those lines, to further than you want to go. And so I know it's gonna, I know they're talking about, you know, the whole homophobia. And, so, you know, I think that I pray we're all ready for it. I, based on what I think it is, I feel pretty comfortable about it, but, continue to pray always that, you know, because and I know there's going to be a lot that will reject where that goes. And I've just always looked at it as the Lord wants to save anyone that calls upon his name.
Amen.
That's what he'll do. And we need to look at, as she puts it, the value of a soul to him. And
Right.
And look at the 6,000 years of corruption, and that's just to me, that's all Joel chapter 2:32 says it. All that call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. There have been people persecuted, wronged, their rights are they have no rights. So anyways, it was just interesting that she said it, and I probably heard it before, but it's always surprising when I hear something. I think I heard it for the first time, and I know I didn't hear it for the first time because I listened to that presentation live.
Yeah,
Right.
So
yeah, like I didn't hear, and somebody mentioned it, I think on Sabbath, that two of you heard her say that the Panium is going to be, or Panium is going to be at the end of, sometime near the end of 2021.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, she said it was not at the beginning of 2021, more towards the end.
Mhm.
So you are scheduled for the third and fourth part at the end of December on Wednesday, the 30th. Would you like to present it next Wednesday, or would that be too soon?
Oh, that would probably, I think that would be too soon.
Okay.
I mean, I could try, but.
It's up to you because it's two more presentations, and so I don't want to push you. I'm just asking if and I know there's some people that are flexible, like Tony. She's really flexible. She's not here right now. I know she's busy with her brother, and so if you want to do it before the end of December, speak up and we can rearrange the schedule. You know, if you want to do it on a Wednesday night, if you want to do it on Wednesday night, the Sabbaths are pretty full, but if you wanted to do it on a Wednesday night,
Did you mean Friday?
I did not. I
Okay.
meant on Wednesdays.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Not
Jackie.
on Wednesday.
Yeah, Jackie's. Because Wednesday, December the 2nd, Jackie was going to present, but she is volunteering to do all the Fridays.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so we didn't want to overdo her. So she's not going to do Wednesday the 2nd.
Oh, okay.
So it is open, but if nobody else has something, then I was going to push to get mine done. But so if anybody does have something ready for next Wednesday, it's open. But so there's that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was thinking of doing it on Sabbath, the 26th, and then something
Oh,
else on the 30th.
right, because you and okay, so you want me to put that on Sabbath the 26th then? Okay, that's a good idea. And so you're gonna have time to do something else Wednesday the 30th that falls really quick after
Yeah, I
that.
was thinking about doing about Muhammad.
Okay, okay,
But so then one thing about doing it on the Sabbath is I think more people will be there.
right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good. All right, I'm switching that in the calendar on the schedule. So unless you're not serious, but you're serious, right? So I'm putting it the part 3 and 4 for Sabbath the 26th.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm curious.
Okay. Okay. Are you serious? No, just kidding. Okay. Cool. Awesome. All right. And I can't remember. Did they actually put the Muhammad video for Sister Terry on the website already?
Yeah, I saw that today.
It's on there?
Sure which one it is, but I guess it's the first one she did, but you know, she had kind of a follow-up too.
Yeah. Oh, good. So they've added them. Yay. Okay. Good, good. So that was July
Good night, Sister Linda.
or November 7th. 11. Okay. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Okay. Good night, Sister Linda.
Good night, Sister Linda. Let's see, did she? I wasn't very good at looking at the chat sometimes.
Nobody was asking questions in the chat, so it's all good. And you got Jackie said thank you. Cool. All right, fantastic.
Good. So we'll get
Well,
back on
yep, I
track.
just really like the way that Tess, I mean, right from the beginning, when I first heard this presentation, I just really like the way she filled in all those waymarks for us.
Yeah.
So that's all I know.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Well,